And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Darcy Weir, who has made 18 feature-length documentaries and 2 docuseries on both Amazon Prime and Apple. His projects are on the world's most captivating mysteries like UFOs, ETs, cryptids, and more. And his newest release is called The Psychic Phenomenon. Darcy, thanks for joining me again, and welcome back.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, in your documentaries, you've delved into UFO cover-ups, obviously. What is the most disturbing evidence you've found suggesting that ET bodies or tech is being hidden from the public?
Evidence, I think, is the hardest thing to get when you're documenting or researching this subject. I think the most disturbing evidence that is published that we know of, if you look at the activity from the Air Force since the 1940s until now, they've always said that there's nothing to see here, right? If you look at 1976, when Iran had a incursion into their airspace over the city of Tehran, you look at the testimony from the people from there, like thousands of people at night saw this UFO flying low over the city of Tehran, and 2 fighter jets were scrambled to intercept it. Both of them couldn't use their missiles or armaments against this UFO. They had to kind of escape by at least 2 miles until their instruments came on again. And this thing emitted a smaller UFO that went over to the mountains and kind of landed, apparently. There was a blackout in the city. And, all these reports come from previous high-ranking military officials and air traffic people and stuff that were part of this confrontation in Iran. There's like a famous press conference that was held in the United States. I think James Fox had something to do with that being organized too, back in the 90s. And we know from their testimony that the American Air Force was very interested in this, and they were over there the next day after this encounter and were getting debriefed by the Iranian military on what happened. So the Air Force was basically over there saying, we want to know what that was, all of your files, all the testimony, and yet it's not theirs. And they're going to the public since forever, since Project Blue Book days, saying that it's all prosaic or, misidentified by observers, right? I think that's kind of like the most well-documented, disturbing aspect of this phenomenon. The fact that it's covered up, right? That there's a lie being told to the public, but then their activity, the Air Force, the Navy, the militaries of the world are saying there's nothing to see here.
Have you ever experienced a personal UFO sighting or psychic event during your research that was so intense that it left you questioning your own sanity? And if so, how did it influence your filmmaking?
So I've seen, I think, 2 UFOs in my life. And the first time I ever saw something was when I was about 21 years old. I was flying from Colorado to the west, and I was looking outside of the window of this aircraft that we were on, just a normal flight, sitting in the window seat, and it's daylight. It's a sunny day. You could see the clouds below. And I thought, I would love to see a UFO. At this point in my life, I had never produced a documentary or anything, so this wasn't in the middle of my research. But I was just thinking about it, and instead of looking straight out towards the clouds below and the horizon line, I looked up. And when I looked up, I saw what I think was like a square metallic sort of cube object. And I was actually quite frightened. I thought, what the heck? That shouldn't be there, towards the stars, but it's obviously a sunny day. And I had this like old Sanyo camera at the time that was like a pocket cam. So I reached for that, turned it on, and this like little lens is kind of popping out of it. And as I'm doing that, this thing is just kind of moving above the fuselage. And I'm trying to see if I can but I had no chance to record it. And I was frightened at that point because I had never seen something like that. This thing had moved above the fuselage and out of my view. And I'm just like, what the heck was that? What's going to happen now? The person sitting next to me saw that I was a little bit panicked, and I was just like, I just saw something weird and I didn't know what to say or talk about, but it was an uncomfortable flight after that. The second time I saw something, I was living in Australia. I was actually I was filming interviews that would later be used in a documentary series called Secret Space UFOs. I interviewed a guy named like Damien Knott, um, an Australian in New South Wales, and I interviewed Shane Ryan, the lead investigator of the Westall 66 case, broad daylight mass witness sighting outside of Melbourne, Australia. And one night when I was living in South Oakley, I was walking down this hill with my housemate, this British guy named Stephen Hockley, and we were heading to get pizza, and we saw this sort of like orb, sort of ball of light all of a sudden appear in our periphery. And it was noticeable. It was way, way, way up. So I guess it could have been something at a very high altitude or in space. But the difference about this, us thinking it wasn't a meteorite, is that it wasn't sort of like burning up and getting brighter as it went. It just stayed a solid light. And as it went over the horizon, it kind of, on the way to the horizon, it did a bit of a zigzag and then went straight. And we looked at each other. I was like, "Did you see that?" And he was like, "Yeah." And we just didn't mention much of it and kept going to get dinner. But I guess that was like in the middle of one of my research exploits, and I saw something weird. I don't know if that was like one of ours, but it was just a really strange thing. And I wasn't thinking about a, UFO or something at that time.
If we get back to the cube, how big was it?
It's hard to say, honestly. I mean, it could have been, I don't know, 5 feet by 5 feet. I don't quite know. All I know is that it was above the craft and kind of like moving alongside at the time.
Well, since you thought about seeing a UFO, do you think you psychically manifested it or possibly it connected with you?
I don't know. Like, and I've never done something like a CE5 before, and I'm not like, I don't consider myself a psychic or anything. I'm just interested in all this phenomenon. And I, I guess maybe, but there's always, I thought maybe I was imagining it or something at the time. Thought I might have like had gone crazy or something for a moment, but I remember it, and I haven't seen a UFO since. So, like, other than the second time, it's not like I'm going outside and looking up every night and manifesting these things. And I look up to the sky all the time.
Mm-hmm. Based on your interviews with insiders, do you think it's possible that there's an active alien hybridization program involving humans? And if so, have any whistleblowers shared anything with you?
I did make this docu series called Pascagoula 73, which is on like Amazon, Tubi, I don't know, it's Roku, Amazon, and I think even YouTube for free if you go to YouTube Movies. But that case is about Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson. These are two abductees that are pretty famous now. The Mississippi area, the state, the river of Pascagoula is where they say they were taken. They were fishing one night, and supposedly that was not the only time they ever had this sort of interaction. It carried on throughout their lives, both in Calvin Parker's and in Charlie Hickson's. And one of the things that Calvin Parker talks about in his hypnosis regression that we show in the docu-series, um, he talks about how in one of the abductions, he felt like they were taking genetic material from him. And in another episode, this new experiencer who said she was out on the other side of the river that night, named Maria Blair, she said she was abducted the same night with her husband because he was supposed to be hopping on a fishing boat and going out. And she was going to basically say bye to him. But that night, this thing was going along the Pascagoula River. They saw the interaction on the other side with Calvin and Charlie. But then on their side, 30 minutes later, they got some attention. And in her hypnosis session that we feature in the series, she talks about how she remembered them taking eggs from her. And she stated that they're trying to create some kind of hybrid human between them. And I mean, this testimony seems to be pretty common when you look at the research from David Jacobs, who kind of carried on from Bud Hopkins. These were abductee researchers and collected testimony and all kinds of evidence that they could in terms of this phenomenon. It's possible. I mean, we're doing genetic research right now. We're crisping our DNA. I mean, the COVID vaccines were an example of that were rolled out en masse. We have the ability to genetically modify our offspring if we want, although it's illegal. Who knows if in the future that is a common practice?
What do you think the ET's agenda is, as well as their end game?
Well, I can't say that I know that. I can only listen to the testimony from experiencers that say that they've had encounters. And I'm not even sure that it's all ET. I mean, people hypothesize. I don't know if you've ever spoken to Michael P. Masters, but he believes that maybe it's us from the future that have been very heavily modified through our own evolution via science. Then there's the crypto-terrestrial theory that there's something that's existed in our oceans or in our solar system for longer than us. And we're just kind of living on the surface, you know? Mm-hmm. I guess when we talk about ETs, extraterrestrials, the old theory that was very common was that everything came from another star. But what if it's already here? But yeah, if it's extraterrestrial, I guess one of the main motives we could deduce, because I'm anthropomorphizing here, but to exploit and to research. You know, we do that on our planet all the time to others, cultures, other countries. We conquer, we exploit minerals, we exploit labor, and we, you know, take what we want. And sometimes we give back, but we just don't know that unless this stuff is public. It's just all hypothesis.
Well, you said you haven't participated in a CE5 event, but for the people that do, sometimes they'll ask the ships to blink for them or do things, and they appear to respond.
Mhm.
And I don't understand how they can respond from so far away. Do you think that the ETs themselves are psychic?
Well, I think there should be evidence of that. And there seems to be through the encounters and testimony of experiencers from all around the world. Like you said, people just see a craft sometimes and they send out an intention or a thought and they get a visual response. There's even discussion and cases where experiencers have looked at a craft and they've had thoughts beamed into their head. I mean, even Betty and Barney Hill experienced this way back when. Barney remembers looking through his binoculars at this light, seeing that it was a craft in the sky, magnified, and he was being told, stay there, don't move, we're coming, that type of thing to his mind. And it's possible that if we have the ability to psychically connect with one another or to go outside of our body and look at distant locations on the planet or in our solar system, why couldn't a non-human intelligence that also has a brain have that ability as well? I think it's possible.
Do you think it's possible that there could be a non physical entity next to us putting on a light show in the sky for us?
So you're talking about like a
You know,
dimensional being?
yeah, dimensional, to put it in simple
Sure.
terms, a ghost next to us, or
Yeah. So I think like we have abilities to look into other dimensions through technology, right? Our eyes can only see in a certain color and light spectrum. Um, but further to that, we can only see like basically electromagnetic. We can't see the electromagnetic spectrum. We can't see into infrared or ultraviolet and beyond that, right? It goes into
Mhm.
this radio wave land. And when you start to think like that, and we're using technologies to aid into seeing that in space and, even on the planet when we have high powered camera systems that use forward looking infrared technology and stuff, then yeah, there could be things there that we just can't see with our own eye. And that is kind of looking into another dimension, so to speak. That's looking into a spectrum that we're just not allowed to see all the time. And I think there is a possibility that there's things out there that are constantly around us that we don't even know.
Well, you've got some big names in your new movie, like Thomas Jane, who's narrating it. What drew you to collaborate with him?
So Thomas Jane isn't narrating. Actually, my friend Tom Thompson narrated this doc, but Thomas Jane is a great guy.
Yeah.
He's an amazing actor from the Expanse series. And of course, going back, he's got a great catalog of films, Stephen King films and The Punisher and so on and so forth. Um, but he is very interested in this phenomenon. And I think what people may find out as he discusses it more in public is that he's also an experiencer. So he was kind to offer some time to pontificate on the theories of psychic abilities and where we're going with technology and how the planet's doing and the non-human intelligence sort of phenomenon and discussion, right? Um, so that was amazing. I mean, I'm humbled that somebody would give me their time. This is not he's hyper intelligent, in my opinion. Like, this is a guy that really knows his stuff, knows the history of this, and can explain everything pretty eloquently to the public.
Your new movie delves into the intersection of psychic phenomena with UFOs and UAPs, basically the same thing. How do you see these fields overlapping? And what evidence from your research do you have to support it?
We look at remote viewing, which is a psychic ability. Really, what we're examining in this is like the history of controlled remote viewing that has 6 stages to it. We're talking to a number of really professional controlled remote viewers and the history they've had with it, like Joe McMoneagle remote viewing Mars and seeing a non-human intelligence a million years ago, which people can Google that CIA paper from 1984. It's free online. And then you've got people like Paul H. Smith, who's had remote views of UFO sort of targets in his time. Ingo Swann remote viewed the moon, and he had interactions with some kind of non-human intelligence there, was warded away, never allowed to look at that place again. And he even felt like he was stalked or haunted after that. He was quite, it really changed his life in a certain way. And then you've got Russell Targ, who talks about the fact that Ingo was able to remote view the ring of Jupiter before science was even able to optically detect it, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you can look outside yourself at a place and accurately look at something at Jupiter, which is way further away than the moon, and you can also do that at Mars, and all these remote viewers are reporting something anomalous, and indicate that there is something out there that's a non-human intelligence that has existed and still exists. I mean, I kind of take that seriously. And I also look at Ingo Swann's kind of channeling session where he connected with an intelligence that said they were in orbit of the moon. It all kind of just adds up to tell this story that maybe there's something there.
Even though the program had success, they eventually canceled it. At least that's the way I see it. Do you think that it works that good, or it doesn't work that good, and that's why they canceled it?
I think the canceling of the program was to take it in-house into an intelligence agency and keep it less public. In 1991, they announced the cancellation, and when they were asked, they said it wasn't effective. But if you look at the research that was actually done, which was later declassified, Russell Targ, his son is a lawyer and successfully sued to have those documents declassified from the program, Stargate program. And it shows the effectiveness in those documents. Additionally, RSI still conducts the research with Ed May, and they found it to have a very high percentage of effective remote views, psychic abilities, right? So, look, there's a difference between a remote viewer that's just starting out that may not really have their abilities attuned, and somebody who's highly psychic that's been doing it for a long time, and you can give them an anonymous target that comes out of this envelope, and they end up illustrating to a T, like almost perfectly, what the location and the object looks like and the things that are around it. That is incredible. And I think that is why the intelligence and military agencies were interested in this as an intel, as an asset to them to find out information about sites that are of their adversaries, right? Mm-hmm. I've explained this before. Like, if you have a satellite now, it can take great 4K or higher resolution than that pictures and videos of locations all around the planet. But if you've got a bird's eye view of the top of a building, what good is that? You might want to look inside that building. You might want to understand the personnel that are inside there working. What are they working on? And one of the things that Russell Targ talks about is the fact that he had a high-powered psychic named Pat Price that looked into buildings. He could look into a safe. He could read the words on a paper that were locked away in that safe. And that's an incredible intelligence asset. You know, that's like an amazing ability for these guys to have, to wield. So, of course, they don't want to break to the public that this is real. They want to keep it secret and keep it for themselves, in my opinion. And another thing Russell Targ told me is that at the end of that program, in the last year, they brought in 2 remote viewers from the CIA, 1 male, 1 female, and they were incredibly psychic. And they, you know, learned all 6 stages and became very good at it, and copied the whole process. And then after that, the canceling of the program and the public announcement that it wasn't effective. I think the CIA just took it in-house. And if you talk to Paul H. Smith, who's teaching the Ingo Swann School of Remote Viewing, controlled remote viewing still today, he took it over. He'll say that I have some clients that come to me that are military and intelligence still to this day. And they hire them to remote view certain targets.
While we're on the subject of the incredible, while you were making the film, did you come across any personal discoveries of the psychic phenomena that changed your whole perspective of it?
Well, yeah, I looked at Chris Ramsey's account of learning up to stage 4 how to become a remote viewer. And he did a whole series that's on YouTube. You can check it out on his channel called Area 52 Investigations. He basically talked about how he approaches everything skeptically. And I think that's a powerful way to go about the world so that you can learn for yourself and identify if things are true or not. He learned, his friend Nelson showed him and brought him in how to do all this stuff. And he had surprising effective remote viewing sessions that worked out. If you looked at the testimony from Tracy Garbett Dolan, who we feature quite heavily in this documentary, I think she's a brilliant mind. She's really on track with sort of identifying consciousness and examining all the relations between the human brain and possibly quantum world of science. I think she's one of these people that said, you know, to me 3 years ago that she thought maybe the human brain is a room temp quantum computer, right? And I find her story pretty interesting because she went to the Rantha mystery schools. She learned how to remote view too. And when she did her first major remote viewing exercise, she had a very effective remote view that she illustrated on paper and saw this eye of another person and a water fountain and a large body of water around that fountain. And later on, she would travel to that place and meet with the person that actually was the target in the remote view and become friends with them and, you know, find out that that was an incredibly psychic event for her life. So I think there are people that come to this and are really, really effective. And, you know, there's some people that just maybe don't have that much of a psychic ability.
That was kind of my next question. Do you think that the top level psychics or top level remote viewers just have a gift?
I think, yeah, there's all kinds of gifts that people have in the world. There's gifted NBA players because they have a physical stature that allows them to, you know, jump high and run forever with great stamina and endurance. And athletes have amazing gifts. And then you got somebody like me who's finishes in the lowest percentile of athleticism, but I know how to tell a story and edit and film and interview people, Same thing applies to apparently psychics. There's people that are highly psychic. And I think there has to be something mechanical there. I think there has to be something to do with their brains that might be a little bit different from other people's brains. And to give an example, Dr. Jeffrey Tarrant, who we feature in the documentary, he was part of the telepathy tapes research with Kai Dickens. He travels around with psychic mediums and remote viewers and stuff, and he's putting an EEG net on people's heads and measuring their brain activity. And he seemed to identify this psychic Laura, who we feature in the doc. She does readings of his life and readings of all kinds of people's lives and does precognitive views of the future and the past. She looks into and your present and the people that are around you and makes all these predictions that seem to pan out. And when that's happening, it seems the left occipital lobe was firing off with all kinds of activity. So I think we need more research to identify what makes some people more psychic than others. And again, somebody who was part of the remote viewing project with Russell Targ, Pat Price, was one of the most gifted psychics in the world. He was also a police commissioner. And I asked Russ about the correlation possibly between intelligence and psychic ability. And he said, based on his research and what he found, the evidence of prodigious intelligence, like very high intelligence, seems to be correlated with higher abilities of psychic remote viewing. So you can go from your question about do humans have varying levels of psychic ability? And you could extrapolate from that hypothetically, which I do in the doc, maybe non-human intelligence that's more developed than us, that's highly advanced technologically and their brains, physically, maybe they have a deeper psychic connection than most people, and they are able to use those abilities even greater than us.
What's fascinating about the brain scan showing that the occipital lobe is firing off more because that's where your brain processes visualization. And some people say one part of your brain just gets the raw data and then the other side tells the story. And so maybe that one side is the side just getting the raw data.
And to me, when you say visual, you're saying seeing, right?
Yeah.
And you're seeing at a great distance. You're seeing something outside of your body when you're going into this trance or going into this method of connecting with things psychically. So I think it's very interesting. I think it's something should be explored more scientifically.
Well, what is the major takeaway you want the audience to come away with after watching your film?
That there's a deep history of psychic research and phenomena that have been going on throughout history. And it doesn't only stop with humans. It is a non-human ability too. I mean, even Rupert Sheldrake tested out this hypothesis on animals, pets, and their owners. and proved through controlled study that somehow dogs psychically knew when their owners were coming home and stuff like that. But then beyond that, with this UFO phenomena, there must be a psychic component too, because we hear about telepathy, we hear about demonstrated, voice to brain communication. We hear about basically remote viewers being able to connect with non-human intelligence. So I think that might be the universal language, almost like psychic abilities. And I hope that it becomes something mainstream and better developed in the future.
What are your thoughts on disclosure? And do you think it will ever happen?
I think it has already happened to a certain degree, and it's not for everybody. It's like religion is not for everybody. It's what you choose for your life. And I think disclosure is just a time staking process that we're going to have to peel back the layers of secrecy and get to the truth of our reality as time goes on. I mean, we were supposed to get the Epstein files. We never got those, but it's possible that we might get more truth out of this situation. But I do worry that disclosure is also a manipulation process to eventually use that truth against society to control them better.
You mentioned Mars earlier, and recently they've come out and said something like, well, it's very possible that there is or was life on Mars.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
So actually, I was asking that question to Avi Loeb yesterday. He appeared on a podcast, and it's interesting that NASA made that announcement, and the next day Charlie Kirk was assassinated, which was tragic. No one should ever die that way, but that is what took over the international headlines instead of this discussion of a possible announcement of the finding of ancient life on Mars, because there were rivers, lakes, there was an environment there that could have fostered microbial life. And they're kind of talking about, in the NASA findings and announcement, they're talking about like microbial findings and possible fossils from the ancient past. But I think it's like little d disclosure. And what Avi also said yesterday was that they're supposed to receive those samples physically in 10 years or whenever they're able to retrieve it from Mars. They're just looking at the data of what was collected by their instrumentation over there, taking core samples from a known area that's like a dry lake or dry riverbed over there. So it's I think it's like a PR thing. It's like a bit of a disclosure, like to get us thinking in that direction that we're not alone from NASA,
Potentially a test
potentially.
to see how we would handle it.
Yeah.
Well, since you talked to Avi, what's the latest update with the Three Eye Atlas?
So he was challenged on this interview by basically Ross Coulthart, because Ross, who's a friend of mine, essentially he said he spoke to multiple different astronomers that said this is nothing but a comet, right? What Avi said is anomalous about this object that other astronomers who would be feeding information to Ross that may be sort of not thinking outside of the box and looking at the observations correctly, which Avi claims he's looking at things properly and the other astronomers are not. The fact that the object is anomalously large, it's like 1,000 times the size of Oumuamua. It's about the size of Manhattan, and that's rare. He claims that that's like anomalous. I don't know. I'd say rare for sure. And that it's moving at 6,000 times the speed of a high speed car. He kind of mentioned that. He said usually a comet will emit its light source. You'll see the tail at the back, but for whatever reason, this is emitting a light at one point, a light plume in front of it, which is anomalous. He said that the actual object is made from nickel and there's no traces of iron. And most objects, like even asteroids and comets, would have iron, nickel, and other trace elements inside of there that you would definitely detect. He said that the plume, like the actual tail that comes off of it, is very faint, and that could be caused by a thin layer of metallic surface on the front, which you would, you could kind of assume comes from a craft. It's also another thing that seems to be a strange trajectory of the object is that it's going to arrive in our solar system in line with all of the planets as it enters close to the sun. And then, so if it is a comet, it would then revolve around the sun and shoot out of the solar system. So he's hypothesizing if it is arriving into the solar system in line with the planets as it goes, that's almost perfect trajectory for you to look at everything optically and using instrumentation as you go to analyze planetoids, right? So it's going to be going by Jupiter. Another thing that he said that's quite interesting, there's a satellite or satellite orbiting Mars, and it's going to get the best pictures coming up on October 3rd and the 2nd, which is just next week, or when is that? 2 weeks from now? Next week. So next week, the agency that operates that satellite is going to have a vantage point of 30 kilometers from the object to take tons of high resolution pictures and such. So it's not guaranteed that those pictures will be released to the public. He hopes they will. They may be classified. They may be something that goes in-house at a space agency, and they end up just poring over the data until they want to release it at a later time. But he's saying that there's going to be all kinds of opportunities to take more pictures that indicate exactly what this thing is.
Do you get the sense from him that this is something naturally occurring, or is he even willing to state it, that this for sure is not a natural object?
I think that's where he leans. Yeah, he's basically indicating that it had acceleration. It sped up at a certain point where, if it's just going through deep space, there should be no reason that a comet speeds up and then slows down. So he seems to think it's a spaceship.
I had a guest on recently, an astronomer, and she felt that it was naturally occurring, but it would be
Many do.
It would be a great thing to put a probe on. If it's naturally moving throughout the universe or the galaxy, I guess, you don't have to fuel it.
That's true.
Put some equipment on it and let it go.
Free Uber ride.
Right. And she said that we already have the capability to do that ourselves.
Cool.
Yeah. One of your other films is about Sasquatch. Is he real?
Well, I mean, if you watch it, I made 2 documentaries in the sort of cryptid world. I made one called The Unwanted Sasquatch, and then a follow-up called Sasquatch Among Wild Men. And my theory in the first one is Patty which is the famous Patterson-Gimlin creature that was recorded in the 1960s, long before Star Wars ever aired with Chewbacca, was not a guy in a suit, but possibly a female upright ape-like being. And that's why they call it Patty. It had like large breasts. If you look at the footage, you can see it. I slow it down and enhance it and stuff, go frame by frame in the Unwoted Sasquatch documentary. But there's other encounters, and there seems to be possibly this like lost tribe of upright apes that are slightly recognized. I mean, there is a Washington State um, Army Corps of Engineers. I think it's like an encyclopedia from the 1970s where they identify to their personnel in certain forests around North America. There have been sightings of these, what are called Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The word Sasquatch actually originates from Canada. Bigfoot is an American terminology from the 1950s. I think it's possible these things live in scarce population in deep wilderness, not only in North America, but also around the world. Because in Sasquatch Among Wild Men, I'm looking at other cultures' sightings in the wilderness of these things, what they call them. And, we don't have to go that far back in history where large portions of the world were connected, right? We had the Bering Ice Bridge or land bridge between what is now China and Alaska. So great migrations took place of different animals from that part of the world to our part of the world. And that's why we have black bears that look very close to the sun bear in China. And we have giant cats in North America like cougars. And, people even say there's, well, scientists say that there's, mammoth bones found all around North America, like the northern parts, but you also have evidence of that maybe existing in parts of Russia and stuff like that, right? So we were all connected at some time, and there's a possibility that this type of species may exist very scarcely and hidden and less acknowledged by mainstream science, probably because you'd have to shut down like the logging industry and such if you announce this upright sort of primate type being living in deep wilderness. But there's all kinds of theories out there, and I just like to examine these fringe theories for my documentaries.
Well, where do people go to watch the psychic phenomenon?
It's available on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube Red, I think. But it'll be more available as time goes on. And if people want to follow me, they can go to my website, occultjourneys.com, see a whole catalog of previous films I've made, and they can connect with me on socials like Twitter at Occult Journeys. Same thing on YouTube at Occult Journeys. And on my YouTube channel, I put up the Puerto Rico documentary for free. People just want to watch that. I'll be uploading some more doc stuff there and some unique interviews I've never published before. On Instagram, Darcy Weir Films, and Facebook, just Darcy Weir. So I'm happy to connect.
Darcy, before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
We build the future. Whether that's negative or positive, we influence what's going to happen. So try to be the positive change that you want to be for your family or for your friends. And the reality that unfolds as we move into the future.
Darcy, thank you for your message, and thank you for coming back and being my guest again.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.